Holodomor Ukraine genocide.
Hello, teacher and classmate. My name is Aaron Osornio, and today I am talking about political situation. With the Soviet Republic, the collectivization of farms is established. The most prosperous place in agriculture in that region is Ukraine, known for Europe's barn. Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and the Northern Caucasus were the regions most punished by the state's proposed forced collectivization. It forced the peasantry to become a proletarian in late 1927. The so-called crop crisis broke out. The situation gave Stanley the perfect pretext for intervening directly in Ukraine. In response to that crisis, the Soviet Union launched a 5-year plan aimed at developing an ambitious economic project. And one of his started proposals was that in wheat export that paid the bill, Ukrainian wheat exports. From 1913 onwards, they began to requisition the Ukrainian grain went in a abusive way, leaving the lands without the seed necessary to allow them to germinate, nor did they give the lands enough time to be able to replant.
Hi teacher, my name is Jose Manuel Guzman Sanchez and I am going to talk about causes of the genocide. There are two fundamental and opposing views on the political leaders of the tragedy, and many intermediate views among them. According to the first view, the Holodomor would have been an intentional act of extermination unleashed by the Soviet Central Power, led by Joseph Stalin, and in particular against Ukrainian nationality. According to the other view, the tragedy would have been the result of the historically bad conditions of the Ukrainian countryside and the sabotage undertaken by rich farmers, called kulaks, who would have monopolized and destroyed crops and livestock as a method of opposing the process of collectivization. The genocidal nature of the Holodomor, with strong sense of being an artificial famine created by Soviet regime commanded by Joseph Stalin. Thus, according to Ayn Applebaum, famine was not caused by cause or failure, so that could only be intentional.
Hi teacher, my name is Aline Torres and I'm going to talk about development of the genocide. Between 1917 and 1921, Ukraine briefly became an independent country and fought to retain its independence before succumbing to the Red Army and being incorporated into Soviet Union. In the 1920s, Soviet central authorities, seeking the support of the populace, allowed for some cultural autonomy through the policy known as indigenation. By the end of the 1920s, Soviet leader Joseph Stalin decided to curtail Ukraine's cultural autonomy, launching intimidation, arrest, imprisonment, and execution of thousands of Ukrainian intellectuals, church leaders, as well as Communist Party functionaries who had supported Ukraine's disactiveness. Causes of the famine. The origins of the famine lay in the decision by a Soviet leader Joseph Stalin to collective Communist Party agitators forced peasants to relinquish their land, personal property, and sometimes housing to collectivizations Collectivization led to a drop in production, the disorganization of the rural economy, and food shortages. It also sparked a series of peasant rebellions, including armed uprising in some parts of Ukraine. The rebellions worried Stalin because they were unfolding in provinces which had a decade earlier fought against the Red Army during the Russian Civil War. Farms, villages, and whole towns in Ukraine were placed on black lists and prevented from receiving food. Peasants were forbidden to leave the Ukrainian Republic in search of food. Despite growing starvations, food requisitions were increased and aid was not provided in sufficient quantities. The crisis reached its peak in the winter of 1932–33, when organized groups of police and communists ransacked the homes of peasants and took every edible from crops to personal food supplies to pets. Hunger and fear dropped these actions, but they were reinforced by more than a decade of hateful and conspiratorial rhetoric emanating from the highest levels of the Kremlin. From famine to exterminations. Between 1931 and 1934, at least 5 million people perished of hunger all across the Soviet Union, among them, according to a study conducted by a team of Ukrainian demographers, were at least 3.9 million Ukrainians. Police archives contain multiple descriptions of stains of cannibalism, as well as lawlessness, death, and lynching. As the famine was happening, news of it was deliberately silenced by Soviet bureaucrats. Party officials did not mention it in public. Western journalists based in Moscow were instructed not to write about it. The first public mention of it in Soviet Union was in 1986, in the aftermath of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant disaster. That disaster too was initially kept secret by Soviet authorities.
In early 1943, the Holodomor ended through Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and the North Caucasus. The result was that around 7 million people died of the weakening, and up to 40 million people across the Soviet Union were affected by famine. It was the greatest crime committed in time and the history of the Soviet Union, constituting one of the greatest humanitarian tragedies of the 20th century.
After genocide. Hi teacher, my name is Juan Carlos Diaz. Ukraine passes the law on the Holodomor in Ukraine of the years 1932–1933, proposed by the country's president Viktor Yushchenko. According to this law, the Holodomor in Ukraine of the years 1932–1933 is declared genocide against of the Ukraine people. Its preamble includes the definition of genocide in accordance with the accepted international jurisprudence. At the 58th session of the United Nations, it was introduced for the first time in the International Political Dictionary as the term to name the Holodomor artificial famine. To prevent genocide, we need to promote interculturality, empathy, and strange respect for the human rights and international observance. And this is all.